Thought Bubble Audio.
Look, up in the sky!
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Welcome to Beer with Geeks with Tim and Frank.
Who are you?
I'm Batman.
I am Iron Man.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Hi, Christopher. I'm Nero.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You're a wizard, Harry.
A couple of guys with a couple of beers and a whole lot of pop culture nostalgia.
Make it so, number one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
Named the dog Indiana.
Life finds a way.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Now sit back and crack open a cold one, because it's time for Beer with Geeks.
It comes in paints?
Shaken, not stirred.
Great Scott!
I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Hi, and welcome to Beer with Geeks. This is the show where two geeks geek out with beer. My name is Frank, and joining me again is good friend of the show, Lauren from Metropolis Podcast. Hey.
Hiya.
Welcome back to Beer with Geeks. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited that we get to geek out about one of our favorite things in the world today.
Yes. We are going to talk about something that is near and dear to both of our hearts. But before we do, are you drinking anything fun?
How fun do you consider a Kirkland Seltzer?
Ooh, Costco. Love it. What flavor?
It's lemon. I wish it was a La Croix, but it's budget seltzer this week. I don't
Budget
know.
cuts. Budget cuts have come to Beer with Geeks, and so it's not La Croix with Geeks this time. It is Kirkland with Geeks. That's fine. That's okay. I am drinking a really interesting beer that I found at a local shop here in town. It is from Brewmaster Jack Brewing and is their Tore Up Experimental Ale. And I was like, what is Tor? Tor apostrophe. I'm like, what is that about? I'm whatever. I'm trying this. And it's because, and obviously, I mean, once you hear this, you're going to feel so embarrassed for me. Like, it's obviously called Tore Up because it was an ale brewed with Torulaspora delbrueckii yeast, right? I mean, how can I not?
That's so obvious.
It was
See,
right
I was
there
thinking
under my
like
nose.
toe up, like this is messed up.
Yeah. No, it's because of the Torulaspora delbrueckii yeast. So I feel like an idiot, but that's fine. Obviously, yeah, I have no idea what that means, but it's good. It's really good. It's actually super tasty. And I'm going to put a link to this yeast in the show notes just for anybody who cares about their fungi. But it's a real thing. I'm not making it up. Anyway, I'm enjoying this beer, and we're going to talk about something we both enjoy very much. So I'm excited for this because we are going to be talking about the greatest superhero television show and the longest running superhero television show of all time, Smallville.
Yes.
Yes. Now, I think Tim and I talked about Smallville years ago on this show, and it's been so long that we thought it was time to bring up the topic again. Tim's gonna hear this episode and be like, "Oh, geez, these guys with the Smallville." But tell me, Lauren, about your story with Smallville. How did you find it? How did you come to love it? Tell me your story.
Mine is pretty dramatic because I'm well aware that you discovered Superman before Smallville. But for me, Smallville is the entire reason. It was my gateway superhero thing. It was the reason why I started loving Superman. And, once you know about Superman, you learn about his best friend a little bit, Batman. And then once you have these two rich things, you just kind of keep on soaking up stuff as it comes along. So I can literally credit Smallville for just me being obsessed with comics media. It was my gateway into everything DC. It's why I can keep track of anything that goes on with Marvel. I love the show so much. I literally would have a completely different life if I was not watching it.
Isn't that crazy? It's so cool how those things, like how just like your entertainment can, like, yeah, it's just entertainment. And I try to keep a pretty level head about
Wait, Frank, I wouldn't be on this podcast if I hadn't watched Smallville. I just realized that.
That's true. That's true. We wouldn't know each other if you didn't watch Smallville,
Exactly.
right? Ultimately.
Because found you guys through Supergirl, which that wouldn't have developed without a Superman interest. At least I don't think it would have developed without a Superman interest. But anyway,
right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, there's a certain I could reason my way into a few things that I wouldn't happen in my life if it wasn't for Smallville too. I like you said, I loved Superman since I was a little kid. But I had the costume. I'd run around with a dish towel around my neck and everything, but I didn't like Smallville when it first started. I wasn't interested in Smallville when it first came out because the way it was promoted, I was like,
it's like Roswell 2.0.
Yeah, it's just Dawson's Creek with superheroes. Like, whatever. This is not my and nothing against and now in retrospect, nothing against Dawson's Creek. But at the time, I was an insecure teenage boy, and I was like, that's a girly show or something. And I've come quite a long way since then. But at the time, I was like, I don't think that looks like it's for me. It looks like it's just like hypersexualized and hyper like that. But that's not Superman to me.
Little did you know if that's what you thought about season 1.
Season
4.
Right? Seriously. But it wasn't until a few seasons in that my local WB station, WPIX in New York, Channel 11, started showing reruns every Saturday. They would do. Was it? I don't know if it was one or more every Saturday, but they started showing a few episodes. And actually, my sister, who also grew up with a great love of Superman, decided to give it a shot, and she started telling me, "This is actually pretty good. You should try it."
And it's funny because I literally listened to your Buffy episode a couple days ago. I texted you about this.
Yeah,
I imagine your sister would have found it familiar or no, she watched it after. So
she saw Buffy Smallville first, and then Buffy much later. Yeah.
Oh, never mind. Because I was gonna say they fit a similar sort of category with the Freak of the Week.
Totally. Feel. She and I talked about that when she not on the podcast, but when she got into Buffy, I was like, "Don't you feel like this, like how this influenced Smallville?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, in such a way." It's so true. It's absolutely true.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. It's all connected. I mean, and there's I love that. I love that it's another take on that formula. But yeah, I didn't get into it until a few seasons in, and then once I got in hard. I mean, I binge watched the first few seasons, started buying the DVDs, and I became a freak for this show. I mean, it's still my favorite TV show. It holds a very special place for me. It's the first TV show that I really geeked out about and got way into the mythology, really got into the memorized, so many details about it, character names, places, episode titles,
right.
Just the chronology, all that stuff. Did you get into that stuff too?
Totally. It's funny you mentioned episode titles because Smallville famously does the one-worded episode titles, so that did help. It actually took me a little while because I was... I started watching Smallville once it's syndicated on ABC.
Yes.
So I didn't get to watch it from the beginning, but I remember seeing promos for it when I was a little kid, and I thought, oh, that seems really cool. But by the time it was airing, I was really self-conscious about the fact that I couldn't watch it from the beginning because I guess I've always had a little bit of that completionist mentality.
Yeah.
So I just didn't watch it. And then a couple years later, when it was on ABC Family, I was like, oh, cool, I can do this now. And I watched all the episodes. I caught up. And I think I was able to catch up right around the time they started airing season 4.
Got it.
So I watched it from then on. But funnily enough, at the time, I just thought it was a really cool show. The Superman stuff didn't hit until the show basically became a Superman show. I remember when I was in high school, I would, throughout season 5, 6, 7, I would sort of take a break and I'd come back to it every December when I was on break and I'd binge watch the episodes using a website called Mini Nova that I don't think is around anymore.
Oh, yes. I remember college.
Yep. So I would catch up on all of it, and then I would just kind of drop it until next year, and then I'd watch now I'm watching the end of season 5 and I'm watching the beginning of season 6. But then season 8 happened and I was just amazed. It was such a different show. It felt like a Superman show, and just something about it really clicked, and that's when I started really getting into Superman. And as you know, as I claim on every podcast I'm on, I'm the biggest Lois Lane fan alive, and that all came from the show.
Oh yeah. So you started watching live around season 4, you said?
Yes.
So
but
right when
I
Lois
felt-
joined.
Yeah, which at the time I didn't even have enough context to understand how important that was. But, you know, every now and then, because it's been a while since the show's been on, and I don't like rewatch it every year or even every couple years. But I think every year there is some moment where I will watch Crusade and I'll just choke up because of how crazy like the scope of that episode is. To have Erica Drans's debut as Lois Lane, to have Margot Kidder in there. It's just a lot.
It's such a significant episode, yeah, for sure. It's a turning point in the show. Just the appearance of Lois is a huge thing, but then everything going on with Clark and with Jor-El and
Right.
you know, the Virgil Swan connection that was still sort of lingering over from seasons 2 and 3, and that really continued into like season 7 and 8.
Yeah. Also, best cold open ever.
Yes, it is. It's a solid. I had to think for a second, but yes, absolutely. With with Lois.
Who are you?
Yeah. Oh my God. What a way for the two of them to meet, right? With him buck naked in the middle of the field, and her just like, "Whoa, hello there."
Yeah.
Great
do
stuff.
you have any standout episodes that you'd like to talk about?
One of my absolute favorite episodes. Actually, this dovetails pretty nicely with Crusade, but leading right into 401 is the season 3 finale, Covenant. And what I love, maybe more than any other moment in Smallville, is the very, very end of that episode, where we hear opera music is playing. Lionel has finally gone to prison.
Yes.
He's getting his hair cut in prison, and everybody dies. Like everybody, like Chloe's house gets blown up, and Lex gets poisoned and falls backwards into a glass coffee table, and the Kents see a giant symbol get burned into the field on their farm, and Clark has given himself over to Jor-El, and just everyone around him is in peril in some way, and Lionel is the one who orchestrated all of it, and it's just such an incredible badass shot, badass moment. I love it so much. That's one of my favorite moments in the entire show, and so that episode definitely gets a special place in my heart for that. What about you? What are some favorites of yours?
I will say absolutely the level of drama in that season finale is crazy, especially for the time. And just to talk about that for a second, I remember that in the season premiere they did not include Allison Mack's credits, so it was like left up to mystery. Like, did she survive? And then in like the second episode and onward, or the third episode onward, one of those that they restored her back into the opening credits.
They did a good job keeping the suspense going there for a little while.
Right, which
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, in this day and age, like nothing is secret anymore. And even if it is, people are just like, oh, that character's dead, but it's TV. They're going to come back. That's not how it was back then. We were all like, what? Did she die?
It's right. And
Yeah.
especially when it has to do with like the opening credits, it's pretty rare that they'll change the opening credit sequence of a show, especially because the show has a theme song and everything.
Right.
It's pretty rare they'll do that because it's expensive to do that and it's a lot of trouble, but they went to the trouble to do it to
Right.
keep the illusion up.
One of my favorite episodes of Smallville, it's one of the ones I think a lot of fans don't like, but it's one of the reasons why I think I love it so much.
If you say thirst, you're off this podcast right now.
We have talked about this, I believe, and I have that's not the one I was going to name, but it has its moments for me. Anywho, no, it's not that episode. It's a Lois Lane centric episode. Go figure. It's Stiletto.
Oh, Stiletto. Oh, Stiletto's fun. Stiletto's fun.
It's a lot of fun, and I remember at the time a lot of people were upset about it because she has this moment where she sort of risks her journalistic integrity. People were saying like, oh, she lied to get a story, she finagled the details to get a story. And while that is true, I really appreciate it from the perspective of it is such a Silver Age premise. Like Lois Lane pretends to be a superhero for a week and then she writes an article about it. And plus, what I love about Smallville's Lois Lane is, which this happened in a lot of versions of Superman. Like the thing about Lois Lane is she's very extra. She'll do anything that is necessary to get the story. But in Smallville's versions, she is very specifically that chick who will do that, whatever that is, whatever extra thing that is. So the idea of Lois just becoming a superhero because she can, I love it.
Yeah, it's true. It is a take on like a mid 2000s take on a more classic Lois Lane trope of just doing anything for the story, anything for the scoop, which is what makes her so, I mean, in a lot of ways, like so lovable, right? And so admirable and such an enduring character.
Yeah, and I do say I love every time in Smallville when she wears a costume. That's one of my favorite like Lois Lane isms ever.
Yes. Yes, and they had Erica do that a lot in the show, which made for a lot of fun.
Yeah, she had like a noob sighted again sort of thing. She had something that made her look like a Spider-Man character at some point. What are the costumes? She had a Wonder Woman variant costume.
Yeah, she had the Wonder Woman one. Yeah, sure.
Stormtrooper, like
yes.
French maid, janitor. This isn't even like a third of the ones she's worn probably in the entire episode. Or in the
I forgot
in the
about some
series.
of those. In the later seasons, I think they did more and more of that. And later seasons, they embraced that a bit more. Maybe she was more game for it. I don't know. But yeah, totally.
For sure. While we're on the topic of Erica Durance, is she your Lois Lane?
She's one of my Lois Lanes. But I still have such a like attachment to Dana Delaney. That I find it hard. And like it's different because it's live action versus animation, obviously. But I just love what Dana Delaney did with that interpretation. Over the years, my favorite has changed. For a long time, you're probably going to judge me for this. For a long time, it was Noelle Neal, and that was a very
wow
from the Adventures of Superman.
I wouldn't
50s
judge you
show.
over that.
Well, and that was like an emotional attachment because she was my first Lois, and so that was why I loved her, and I still love her dearly. But I recognize that like. I would say objectively her performance is not as realistic and certainly not as much a feminist icon as say a Dana Delaney or really lots of women who came after her. But I still think she did a fantastic job, and for the time and place, that was a very progressive portrayal of a woman, honestly, and let alone of a woman in that field. Yeah,
a working journalist in the 1940s, like a woman who was employed in the 1940s. Yeah, heck yeah.
Even if they did keep calling her girl reporter, that was as progressive as it got back then.
Right. I actually like that about you. Like I didn't know that Noelle Neal was initially like your Lois Lane for a long time, but that's really sweet.
For a long time, yeah. But yeah, I love Dana Delaney. But is Erica must be your Lois Lane, right?
I would say tricky question.
I know you love Dana Delaney too.
I do love her. She responded on Twitter once.
That's right.
And
I forgot about
lost my damn mind. It was like my pin tweet for a long time. I was like, oh my God, Lois Lane has swapped words with me. Oh my goodness. But I would say my idea of Clark Kent and Lois Lane has not been perfectly realized in any canon. But I would say Erica, I just tried to refer to her as Lois Lane instead of Erica Durance. That tells you how much I love her. I would say she's about 85% there. It's hard to imagine because I generally think that her character gets better in every single incarnation. And I love Amy Adams, but we didn't have enough screen time with her to really see the progression. I
agree with you there. Yeah.
But
I wish we'd gotten more of her.
I know. Well, never say never. Maybe. I don't know.
True.
I don't know. But yeah, Erica, I think. I like to compare this to Harry Potter. How there's some people in the movies who that is that character in the book for me. Like Professor McGonagall in the movies, that is absolutely who she is in the book. Without a question. Are there any, like Erica Durance is the closest to that to me in the show. Are there any characters in the show where when you think of that character, that is who comes to mind?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Definitely John Glover's Lionel Luthor. Was he original to Smallville?
Lionel Luthor, the name has existed. You know, there have been other names for Lex's father. You know, like it's sort of almost like every iteration decides what the names of Lex's parents are going to be, and there's almost no two that are the same. The correct answer to your question that I overlooked is John Schneider as Jonathan Kent. That is the correct answer. He is my Jonathan Kent.
Oh yes, he's perfect. I
He's
like
perfect.
a slightly younger Ma and Pa Kent.
Yes, having them be in their 40s, having them be, you know, Martha and Jonathan and not Ma and Pa, not so like folksy and elderly, was one of the best decisions they made on this show. To have them be like normal age parents to have a teenager. Great idea.
Yeah, I agree. And Man of Steel took cues from it.
It was kind of a risky pick, but I'm glad they did it.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned it, because obviously everyone on the cast got to age throughout like a 10-year show. John Schneider, he was so young in the beginning, and by the end, like he, when he does come back, I guess he only lasted halfway through, but you know he has his cameos.
Right.
Just what he was able to embody as Jonathan Kent as like the younger father, but then as like the older father who's like very proud and like very much there to support his son. Versus in the beginning of the show where there's a lot of berating Clark just because, well, Clark needed it.
Right.
It's perfect. It really is.
He is the perfect Jonathan Kent. Like I actually do think you said that you don't think you've seen the perfect iteration of Clark or Lois yet. I agree with you. I haven't seen the perfect iteration of them yet. I wish I could take bits and pieces of all the different versions I've seen, but Schneider is the perfect Jonathan Kent. Everyone should just look to him for reference. Honestly. I've not seen a better portrayal, and I doubt I ever will.
Well,
so
it's
good.
cool. In Man of Steel, they have a scene that was almost like verbatim from the Smallville season 10 premiere. Like in the Smallville season 10 premiere, Clark's like working on the farm or something. Then Jonathan, he hallucinates. He comes up and they
they're working on the
heart
fence.
to heart. Yeah, and then BVS, like Clark is kind of on his solo journey, and it's a similar thing where the ghost of Jonathan just sort of appears to him, gives him guidance, disappears. And I absolutely have to believe that Zack Schneider like was referencing Smallville there, because it's amazing to see how they took those cues from Smallville and like worked it into the universe. So Smallville does have its print.
It does, and even I think you're right. I do think that was probably a wink and a nod. In Man of Steel, there's a reference to the Fordham Boy, which I think is a Whitney Fordman reference. They just changed the name a little bit, but I think that's a reference there.
Well,
for
actually,
sure.
When I was watching, oh my gosh, Man of Steel was probably my most anticipated movie of my lifetime. Like, I cannot think of a single movie that I was like more gung ho for than Man of Steel. And I saw it with two really good friends who were huge like Smallville fans. We actually like used to have Smallville Fridays in my dorm room, and we would watch.
That's cool.
Yeah, so like that crew, we saw Man of Steel together, and what was it? There were a lot of things that just had me screaming, and like we were grabbing each other's hands. The Fordham Boy comment, that was one of them. The fact that they had a garage called Sullivan's. The entire bus driving off the bridge sequence, it just felt so much like the Porsche scene in the Smallville pilot.
Sure.
Also, I don't know if you've ever caught this. There's a moment when Man of Steel Clark, he runs into the jerk at the bar, and then when the guy goes to his truck later, he has all the trees like impaling his truck. I thought that was very much a nod to, in the what's it called, the premiere of Smallville. Clark has his revenge by messing with the bully's truck. Same exact thing. Yeah,
he stacked a bunch of pickup trucks outside the dance, right?
Yeah.
In the pilot.
Yeah,
it was in the pilot or season 1 finale. When
I
they
know
went
it was in the pilot. Sorry, I called it the premiere. The pilot.
Right.
Maybe it's a stretch, but as a Smallville fan, like I saw those things immediately and thought of it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that those things were intentionally referencing Smallville, or am I?
That one in particular with the truck, that did feel pretty intentional to me.
Okay.
It's possible that, listen, it's not a stretch to think that someone had the same idea and never watched Smallville and had a similar idea, but it seems it's a pretty close homage, if nothing else.
Yay,
But
validation.
yeah. Oh, I think so. If it makes you feel better, that's where my mind went as soon as I saw it too. Was, hey, that's just like Smallville. So
nice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I do that with everything. Like, oh, that's like Smallville. It's only kind of like Smallville, Frank. It's, there are characters and it's on TV, but I don't know about. But yeah. Oh man.
Did you watch? Well, you watch the CW shows. Well, duh, you watch the CW shows. But I don't think you follow Arrow. Do you?
Yeah, I follow Arrow. I'm usually a little bit behind on it, but yes, I watch all the Arrowverse shows except for Legends at this point.
Well, same. I don't watch Black Lightning or Legends, but so you remember when season 1 of Arrow and season 1 of The Flash came out, they felt so much. They were literally just Smallville season 8.
Yes, I feel like especially Arrow felt like Smallville season 8. And then Flash reminds me of like a lot of the early seasons of Smallville, but like if they were making them today. But some of the formula and just the general uplifting, upbeat overall feel of Flash as compared with Arrow, for example, even compared with Supergirl to an extent. Flash feels like sort of the spiritual successor to Smallville to me, and that I think that's why it's most of the time it's my favorite of those three shows. Like it's the one I enjoy the most. Oftentimes on an individual episode by episode basis. This past season, Supergirl was my favorite by far. But in terms of like how much fun, how much enjoyment am I getting out of it, often it's Arrow, and I think it's because it feels like it's steeped in that Smallville lore. And you want to talk about references. Kevin, you know how Kevin Smith has I love Kevin Smith as a filmmaker, and it's just like a podcast personality, and he has directed a couple episodes of Supergirl, a couple episodes of Flash.
Right. Runaway Dinosaur, I think, is one of his episodes in Flash. I'm blanking.
I can't remember episode titles offhand that he directed, but he's directed like 2 or 3 of Flash and 2 or 3 of Smallville. And he's said that, you know, whenever he goes and directs, he gets to, especially with Supergirl, he gets to see, you know, what's happening this whole season, right? They sketch it out for him to put it in context. Hey, here's the context of the episode you're directing. Like, here's what fits into the bigger picture, the bigger story. And he'll be like, wow, you're actually pulling in Brainiac. That's so cool. And there'll be a whole bunch of the casting, not the cast, but the crew, a ton of the crew used to work on Smallville. They shoot in Vancouver, right? And they'll be like, we did that on Smallville. And he's like, oh, I didn't watch it. And they're like, well, you should. And just like over and over again, he'll be like, wow, I can't believe we're actually going to get this character on TV. That's so cool. And they're like, we did that on Smallville 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's really like repeatedly, he's like, oh, sorry. All right. Like as he talks to like a cameraman wearing a Smallville, like season 7 rap party t-shirt.
Greg Beeman shouting at him, like, we did that on Smallville. Keep up.
Greg Beeman, one of the great directors of that show.
Yeah, whenever one of those mid-season finales would happen, it would always be Greg Beeman, or if it was what do they call the last episode of a show?
The season finales.
Yes, the season finales. Like, it would always be him or Glenn Winter. Speaking of Glenn Winter, the director of photography for a lot of Smallville.
Yes,
it's
half
funny.
Of Smallville. He did every other episode.
Basically.
Yeah. No, seriously. It was him and I forget the other guy's name. Because Glenn was so much better. But yeah, they used to switch off and do every other episode for most of the series.
I remember in Arrow, I think the first appearance of Deadshot, maybe, who was the one who tattoos the name of his victims. Like, I know that's a Victor Zsasz thing, but like the Arrow had his own version. I think it was Deadshot, but like in one of the first episodes of Arrow, there's a villain who has like tattoos of every person he's killed, and like I remember seeing Glenn Winter on his body once, and I was like, I know who that is.
Oh, that's funny. You're right. It is Deadshot. You're right. That is funny. That was Glenn Winter. I missed that. Was that back in like
season 1? I think.
1? Okay.
I think
that's
so.
Cool.
What I was saying about the season 1 of Flash and Arrow is I get what you mean about like the Freak of the Week sort of being similar in the Flash, but those two shows, the way they handled the secret identity in their first seasons, like with Oliver being with like visiting Laurel as like as a the Hood, that's what they called him back then, and her being fascinated with the Hood, and then like Iris being fascinated with the Flash. I was like, oh my god, this is literally like the season 8 of Smallville. Totally. There were so many Clois cues, which actually was really infuriating to see those shows be really successful on the CW, because I was really indignant as a Smallville fan, because I don't know if this was your experience, but I kind of had to be an apologist for Smallville for a long time. People would be like, "You're still watching that show?" or "Oh, that show sucks," or Superman didn't do, or he didn't do all this stuff before he was Superman. I remember when the shows were so popular, I was always pointing out this show is basically Smallville. 2, this show Arrow was created to fill the gap that Smallville left behind. Like, it took the CW about a year to be like, where's our 18 to 34 male audience? And then they greenlit Arrow. And then they became like the superhero network from there, right? Like 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week. There's superhero shows on the network for sure. They owe a lot to Smallville, and honestly, I feel like Grant Gustin is actually really good about acknowledging that, and Stephen Amell too. Well, Grant Gustin, because he was probably with us watching Smallville,
right? Exactly.
On the East Coast, way back when.
Yeah.
He has a Superman tattoo.
I did not know that. That doesn't surprise me though, because I've heard stories. I've heard stories about how, like, on the set of Elseworlds, the 2018 crossover, Arrowverse crossover, when Tyler Hoechlin, who plays Superman, did his shirt rip, that Grant didn't know it was going to happen right then. Like, he wasn't prepared for it. So when Tyler did the shirt rip, Grant like geeked out and was like, "Oh my god!" And apparently, the only reason that they didn't spoil the take was because they had already zoomed in so far into Tyler's chest that you couldn't see everybody break and laugh. But otherwise, that would have spoiled the take, because Grant Gustin geeked out so much at that shirt rip that because he didn't expect it, because he's such a big Superman fan, he was so excited. And they were all saying how they were geeking out going back to the farm that was the Kent farm on Smallville, and having that be the Kent farm in this universe.
Right. And I remember seeing Stephen Amell's tweet earlier, like way before the crossover came out. He said, "Just saw the crossover in its entirety. There's a moment that had me jumping out of my seat." And he was talking about when they put the Smallville theme music in the episode. Yes,
that was such a great little moment of fan service, and made me very happy. They did good there, and I don't know. I have hope that maybe, since Elseworlds and now Crisis on Infinite Earths deals with multiverse stuff, that maybe there's an Earth out there where Tom Welling is Superman and Michael Rosenbaum is Lex Luthor. Maybe.
I have a couple thoughts on that. One, Tom just started a new show, and I'm like, man, he's so desperate to not do this Superman thing.
I know.
But one thought is, I would love if they did, like the multiverse of Superman, and like Brandon Routh, who is literally on a CW show right now.
Yes,
if he would wear the return suit, if Tom would come in, he doesn't even have to wear the Superman suit. I won't be angry at him if he doesn't wear it. Just let me see him in glasses and like, a trench coat. Like, I haven't quite forgiven him for not wearing the suit, but I will be very happy if he just shows up and he wears blue somewhere.
Honestly, if he wore just like the trench coat and the glasses, I'd be happy with that. I'd be so happy.
But I have this, maybe not, because that woman is going to be its own show, so they'll probably cast their own Bruce Wayne at some point. But part of me had a feeling that they were going to I was wondering if they were going to bring Tom Welling in as Bruce Wayne.
That would be cool. I don't know if they would. That feels like crossing the streams a little too much.
But Lois Lane from Smallville is Supergirl's mom.
I know, you're right. Yeah, and that's another. I mean, like, you could have a thing where Supergirl's mom in this universe is Lois Lane in another universe, also in this crossover, right? Like in another multiverse. I would love that. Yeah, I'd be okay with that eventually. At first, I'd be a little bit like, but he's Superman, he's not Batman. Let us Superman fans have something.
I feel like Tom would say yes to being Batman. He'd be like, okay, I'll come back. I'll be Bruce Wayne for like 2 seconds. Like, I think he'd be down for that.
That'd be cool.
It'd be great to see Justin Hartley.
Yeah, it sure would. I mean, we saw his suit in Elseworlds.
Yes, we did.
He was laid waste on the ground, so we saw someone wearing that suit. So it'd be cool to have him come back.
Well, it bugged me back in Flash season 2 when they showed Earth 2. I was so convinced that they were going to bring in Justin Hartley, but they didn't.
Still, it's never too late. It's never too late, especially if they have a multiverse. And also, when I was at Dragon Con in 2018, the Michael Rosenbaum and Aaron Ashmore and Tom Welling were on a panel together, and they all said that, if there was ever like an animated series, they would totally voice the characters. They didn't commit to doing a live action, but they did say, like, once in a while that idea gets thrown around, and like, if they ever did it, I'd be on board to come back and do the voice work. I mean, Rosenbaum's done a ton of voice work. He voiced the Flash on the old Justice League cartoon in the early 2000s.
Right.
He was Wally West
while he was doing Smallville. I wonder about that. Was he like in Vancouver with a tape recorder, just like recording and then sending it off to?
Probably was recording, in Vancouver and sending it off to Warner Brothers. Probably, most likely, unless it was off season or something. But I never thought about that. He probably was. But I mean, it'd be cool if they did the Smallville season 11 comic, which was pretty good. But
did you read all of that? Because I actually have not read it, but I've picked up little bits and pieces.
Did I read all of it? I know I read a lot of it. I don't remember how it ends, so I don't remember. But I must have finished it. I wouldn't have not. I'm too much of a completist to not. So I really, and Brian Q. Miller wrote that book too.
Yes,
he was one of my favorite writers on the show.
Oh my gosh. Brian Q. Miller, can we talk about how amazing his glow up was? He was like a writer's assistant, and then I don't know this for sure. He definitely started as a writer's assistant. I'm assuming at some point he co-wrote an episode, then he wrote an episode, and then he moved up the ladder and eventually got like handed this entire comic. Hey, do what you want. That's amazing. That is what dreams are made of. Like he's definitely not listening to this podcast, and I definitely don't know him, but I'm so proud. That's an amazing accomplishment.
He's such a solid writer, such an amazing writer. I mean, he got sort of, like you said, promoted through the ranks, and just unbelievable what he did. Ended up like being at the helm by the end after the series ended, and I loved what he did. But yeah, he did great, and that season 11 comic was great to have something to hold on to, after the show ended. And I would really love to see them do something, either an animated series or another comic, or I mean, ideally, really bring the show back in some way or whatever, or do some kind of a reunion. But I would love to see it continue in another medium, if not the original medium. Right.
I just remembered season 11. I did not read the comic, but one thing they did that I was so happy about is they took away Lana's power.
Yeah, which I was happy with that too.
Speaking of, that actually might be Power in season 8. That actually might be my most hated episode of Smallville ever.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, it's not a favorite of mine, to be honest. It's not a favorite of mine. Thirst, though, really thirst. Yeah, I don't know. And I feel like Noir gets unwarranted hate.
Really? I've never heard that.
I've heard a lot of people like bag on Noir, and I'm like, it's good. It's a little fillery, but it's good. I enjoy it. I'm also biased because I love the Adventures of Superman stuff, and they literally used establishing shots from that show in that episode. So I guess that's why I'm biased towards it. But I find it fun. I find it fun to watch.
That's the beauty of a show like Smallville that goes on for so long and has like people will criticize like a 22 episode format, but the cool thing is you do get to get your feet wet in all these different places. Like the musical episode in Flash and Supergirl, those wouldn't happen unless if you had like 13 episode seasons, you would not have an episode like that.
That's right.
Similarly, you wouldn't have like the Noir episode of Smallville.
Right. And one thing that Smallville did so well, that I think Flash also does very well, is that even the sort of more filler episodes, and I will not lie and say Smallville's so good, there's no fillers. There's definitely fillers, but even the filler episodes,
like 75% filler.
It's a lot of filler, especially the later seasons. There was a lot of filler, but I feel like even the filler episodes had something redeeming about them and had something that moved the season-long arc along. So you never got cheated. Even in an episode that was just sort of like quaint and whatever, like, okay, they're all going to have a karaoke party and get drunk and they're not going to remember what happens tomorrow. That was a funny episode.
The Hangover episode? The
Hangover episode, yeah. But yet there were things that happened there that moved the plot along. So you couldn't really skip any of them. You couldn't, they were fillers, but they were also kind of not, because you needed to see them to get the even if it's like a post-credits tag or whatever, not actually post-credits, but the last thing before the cliffhanger of the episode would be something that would set up a major plot for the rest of the season. Oh man, I could talk about Smallville for many hours, which is why this is the second time we're having an episode on it. But any closing thoughts, any final things we didn't get to discuss about Smallville that you want to make sure don't go unsaid?
We're running short on time, but I just wanted to ask you which is your favorite season?
Season 3.
Okay.
Season 3. Season 5 is also a close second on that. But Season 3 has a special place in my heart because I feel like it's so solidly constructed and so much fun. And a lot of the... I have a nostalgia for the early seasons. I really do. Because they remind me of like everything they were doing in high school. Like Clark was basically the same age as I was. And so maybe like a couple years older. And so I have this great nostalgia. All the music that they use reminds me of the music I was listening to in high school. Even if it wasn't music I particularly liked at the time, I now associate it with that time in my life. And I'm like, oh man, Lifehouse. Like I wasn't listening to Lifehouse in 2002, but now I look back and I'm like, oh man, like that's that makes me feel like a child again. So I'm very nostalgic for that. And season 3 for lots of reasons is near and dear to my heart. Do you have a favorite?
Real quick, Lifehouse is a deep cut, but the deepest musical cut for me is the Calling, Wherever You Will Go. It's like it's in episode 2. It's the closing song of episode 2.
That's a classic. That's an anthem of the early 2000s. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and like that song is even though it's an anthem, when I hear it, I think of that pan upward to the stars.
Yes.
I think it's the end of Metamorphosis, and it's just I get chills and like my throat closes up a little bit because I choke up a little bit. Absolutely, the music in Smallville was it.
The music was so great. The music was so great. Whenever I hear "She Will Be Loved" by Maroon 5, I instantly think of season 4, and especially because it's that one obscure live version. Is what they use in the show, not the album version that you hear on the radio. Oh man!
Wow, I didn't know that. I'm still learning things about Smallville like all these years later.
It's so good. It's like an acoustic unplugged version. It's so good. I could talk about the music of Smallville in an entire episode, and maybe we should one day, actually. That would be really cool if we each brought like 10 of our favorite songs from Smallville or something and just talk. I could do a whole episode on that.
Tim can keep on going on vacation. We'll just talk about Smallville to the end of time.
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Lauren, thank you so much for geeking out on Smallville with me. Any final words, final thoughts?
Just that Smallville season 8 is my favorite because I felt like that's when it became another show. It became Metropolis, but like another show in a good way, not a jump the shark kind of way. No. Like where it just transformed into something that I wanted to see. I thank Smallville for literally making me the day.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that so much. This is like your geek like birth, came from Smallville. I love that. That's so cool. Yeah. I mean, I joined, forums to talk about Smallville, and then those people on the forums were talking about a podcast. I started listening to Starkville's House of L, the podcast, and now I host a version of that show about Krypton, and from there I joined Twitter, and from Twitter I met a bunch of friends who I'm still very, very close with. And then
this girl started stalking you, and she asked if she could join your network, and that's
a beautiful thing, right? And even like that led me to a career in marketing, using social media for marketing, and that's where I met my wife. So like in a way, you can kind of trace back Smallville to that if you really wanted to make a lot of connections. Like it's a lot of things started for me here. A lot of who I am today. I can't attribute my whole geekiness to it like you can, but a lot of things that are important to me today, started and sprouted from Smallville in a lot of ways. So I have a lot to. We should always hold on to Smallville.
Aww.
I guess is the lesson there.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming back. Tell people where they can find you.
You guys can find me anywhere on the internet at Lauren Nakalwin. If you feel like donating to our Patreon, I can maybe buy some LaCroix next time.
There you go. There's that. That's a plug. Yeah.
Where can they find you, and where can they find our Patreon?
They can find patreon.com/thoughtbubbleaudio. They can find your show, Metropolis Podcast. They can find this show and all of Thought Bubble Audio shows at thoughtbubbleaudio.com. They can find us at Beer with Geeks on Twitter. I'm at Frank Ramblings. Tim is at Timothy PG13. You can find us on all the podcast apps: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the various apps. You'll find us there. Leave us a rating and review if that's your thing. We really love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your shows. And tell us what you thought about Smallville. Tell us your tweet at us at Beer with Geeks or email us beerwithgeeks@gmail.com with your thoughts on Smallville. We'd love to hear some Smallville nostalgia. And if any of you are folks that were OG fans way back in the day, listening to Starkville's House of L or posting on the Krypton site forums or anywhere else, reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Tell us your life story. Tell us how Smallville changed your life.
Tell us how Smallville changed your life. Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Lauren. Always a blast. We'll have to have you back again real soon.
Heck yeah.
This time with LaCroix, I hope.
I'm so for it.
All right, sounds good. Well, until then, cheers.